Hello, everyone. I'm Stephanie Boozer with CUGC HQ. Welcome to today's Connect webinar with Tricerat. Before we get into all of that, I do have a couple of announcements for you. Next week is our EMEA XL. I hope that you all can join it. You don't have to be in EMEA to participate, but it is all of our EMEA-based CUGC local groups coming together for an expanded CUGC event, so hope to see you there. And then our final XL event of the year will be on November 10th, and that's CUGC XL West. So for all of our West Coast CUGC groups, they're coming together. But again, you don't have to live on the West Coast. These are both virtual events, so we hope to see you there. Also, this week is the final week that our applications are open for the CUGC Women in Technology program. This is a mentorship program that pairs women one-to-one. Oops, sorry, slides changing. Pairs women one-to-one with a mentor, and it's great. It's professional and technical goals. So you can screenshot that or click on that. Hope you'll see it. All right, so we're going to be talking about enhancing your printing and scanning workflows. I know that sometimes people get super frustrated with printing, so hopefully we have some good info for you to help you out. Oh, one more note for you. We are recording this webinar and we will send you a link to the recording tomorrow. So be on the lookout for that. Also, type your questions in the question panel anytime that you have them. We're going to take some during the presentation and some after. So just put them in as you have them so you don't forget. And at the end, I'll have a short survey for you. All right, so with us today from Tricerat is Andrew Parlette. He is the CTO. Welcome, Andrew.
All right, thank you.
And keeping an eye on all of your really amazing, awesome questions is Steve Noel. He is a Citrix technology advocate and a consultant. Hello, Steve.
Hello, everyone.
All right, so at this point, I am going to hand things directly over to Andrew to get us started. So Andrew, I'm going to send you the screen right now. All right, there it goes. And I will be back later on, so I'll see you guys in a little bit.
All right, thank you, Stephanie, and hopefully our title slide is coming up. You see that okay, Steve?
Yep, looks good.
All right. All right, so again, thank you, Stephanie, and thank you, Steve, for moderating this. And Tricerat's been a part of the CUGC community for several years now, and so hopefully you've seen us at events or some of these virtual conferences or presentations. And hopefully we get to see you all again soon at some of the CUGC user group events. But we want to share a little bit about Tricerat, perhaps some things you don't know about us, and dig into the software solutions that we have, and then also look at some of the new things and what's coming from Tricerat as well. So look forward to digging into that. Tricerat has been around for 24 years, and during that time, we've really been obsessing over printing and scanning in these solutions. Many years back in about 2000, we pioneered the first ever virtual print driver, and part of that was developing our own page description language. We'll get into a little bit about why that's important and the advantages to that, because it really was developed specifically for remote desktop environments, and so some of the complexities that come around remote printing through Citrix and other platforms, layering that in with local printing or mobile printing and all the different complexities of applications, data, and printers and the combination thereof. And so we really have focused on that particular issue and then making that simple. And there in the second paragraph, we talk about how we've expanded that technology stack so around printing and scanning, really with the intent to simplify the environments, sometimes of which can start very complex, but we want to apply on there a layer that really enhances that simplicity. And then also bottom line savings. So with any of these solutions, we're looking to reduce the amount of time you're spending on this, make it a better solution, and then ultimately leading to savings and more effective spending for your companies. To speak for a minute about our support, we have a net promoter score of 73, which is very high in the industry. We have a large customer base that spans a whole slew of different industries and verticals. And this is important because going back, tying it to how long we've been around, using this kind of a solution, you get historically all of the built up experience and expertise that we've put into this. And so we've constantly improved that virtual driver and made it best in class. So you take advantage of all of that we've built over time. But also looking forward, and this speaks to our support process, things continue to change. There's new versions of OSs, new platforms, new technologies, new printers, new different ways of using applications. And so moving forward, again, we're focused on that. So as things change in the environment, you have us alongside as a partner to make sure it continues to work effectively and in an optimal way. So there are two areas, which might be obvious as the two areas we're looking at, which is the user side, the administrator side. And so we're going to look at both of those of how we deliver this more effective solution when it comes to printing and scanning. So let's start with that user side. We're looking at this user consistency and flexibility. Consistency is a big part here. If you have a simple environment with one platform and users have one application, okay, that's simple. It's not going to come with complexities. But we all know you get into building these environments for the different applications and user types, and there's a whole mash of different technologies that layer in together to make your one solution. And so for printing, a solution to go on to be consistent across all of that is an important piece for the users to make it simple and effective so that when they go in there, they have the printer that they need, no matter what the environment, remote connecting into a Citrix VDI, maybe local on their desktop or mobile, or all of the above. Having that layer across your environment is a very important piece to that consistency. And the right printer for the right location. So we're going to get into, from the administrator side, how I assign based on who I am and where I am connecting from. And so there's this aspect of dynamic, intelligent printer assignment. It's the right printer. So when I walk up, badge into a thin client connecting to my virtual desktop, the printer I need is right there, ready for me. I shouldn't even have to think about it. Let it blend into the background, have it there, ready for me. I print, I'm productive in my use of the system. Now, certainly that should be true the vast majority of the time. I log in, I use that printer, it should be dynamically built for me. But in those cases where you might have a different use case, perhaps I'm working at a different location today, or it's a different application than my job normally calls for, a self-service capability helps the user that when they do need access to a different printer, they can find it quickly, easily. It is right there in their session. They don't need the help desk, and they carry on with their work. And so we'll show even from the administrator side how that's done. But these are the different aspects to really help drive productivity when it comes to printing and scanning within these enterprise environments. I'm going to show here an example on a desktop here. This is Screwdriver's Printers, which is the user-facing application. And so I have here a list of printers that show up in my session. And I would like to mention, when we were running this earlier, there might be a slight delay as I'm doing these demos, but as I speak, it'll certainly catch up. So here I have a list of the printers I have, and a printer and a button where I can add printers additionally into my session if I need to go out and find a printer. But I also have this maps feature where I can go over and click, and in this case, I have an environment with a map. But I could see there on the left side, I could have multiple floors or multiple locations, which with a nice filter dialog there to find the right area for me. And in this case, I have a simple office diagram with a few rooms. Now, there are more printers here in this office than showing on this map, but for my particular user, there's two that I have access to, and so those are the two that show up as available for me, one in the break room, and then of course one in the conference room. So I can see those as just pins on the map. And I can click on one and I can see this is a user allowed printer. In this case, a direct IP Rico. It says you want to refresh. Everything is already ready for the user. So it's a quick database call with metadata coming down, and everything's ready in the session. The printer builds and the user has what they need. In this case, I see here the Rico is built. Let me open up BoardPad here just to show from an application point of view. and I go to File, Print, and I can see there that list of printers. And so again, that consistency, this is pulling printers from print server, direct IP printing without print servers, my local client. All of those are coming in together as one cohesive view of printers that I have access to and can print to. All right, let's switch to the other side, which is the administrator view. And a lot of what Tricerat does focuses on optimizing the process for the administrator, making it efficient, making it effective, reducing the amount of time that they have to spend on what is otherwise sometimes a painful process of print management. We want to make that simple and quick. And so that dynamic printer assignment, this is what we talked about from the user side, but that only goes so far if it takes a lot of effort for the administrator. And so we're going to provide a console that is easy to dynamically assign those printers out. And I'll show you how to do that in just a second. The simplicity and visibility is a big piece of this. So having a tool that can easily show, when a user might need a different printer, or you need to manage a new wing of the building coming on. And so a way that I can quickly assign those printers out to that and see what's going on. Thinking about some of the other options of scripting or group policy objects, or there's various other methods. But when you start dealing with several thousand lines of scripts or complex GPOs, it gets difficult to even see what's going on, and making changes then takes a lot more effort. And so having an interface where I can see what's already available and quickly adjust and add new things really leads to that time savings and cost savings there. And speaking of cost savings, reducing help desk calls, again, both sides. If a user doesn't have to call the help desk, it saves them time. And how many times are Citrix admins getting tickets about printing that are escalated up because of printing difficulties in the Citrix environment? So if we can reduce help desk calls, that frees the administrator to focus on other things of the infrastructure and strategic initiatives. So anytime we can reduce those help desk calls, big time savings on both sides. All right, I mentioned switching back over here in the demo environment. This here is the screwdrivers administration, and I can see here on the left print servers and printers that I want to manage. And in fact, I have a print server added in here with just 3 printers, but that's an agent that can install on an existing print server if you have those in your environment. And we've seen thousands of printers on a print server where our agent can effectively manage reading the information in the database and then also managing print jobs through that print server to optimize its process. But we can also work without a print server and direct IP printing. I'll show you that in a minute as well. Here is an Active Directory view, and so I'm going to expand my OU. I can assign to anything in the directory. It could be a user, a group, OU. In this case, I'm going to select my user, and I'm going to grab one of those printers that I have and drag and drop it over onto the user. And just like that, the assignment pops up here ready to go, and I have the option of doing always assign the printer, meaning basically it's an admin assigned printer. I can do show by default, but have user being able to remove, or vice versa. The user has access to it, but don't show by default. And that's what feeds into the map and the list that we looked at earlier to give the user access. But in this case, let me just make it an admin assigned printer, meaning when I log in, I'm going to get the printer. Makes sense. Let me do the same thing here, drag and drop over to the domain. There you go. And then speaking to the visibility aspect, I can quickly now see here for my user, I have one printer that is, I inherit because I'm a member of the domain, of course, and then another printer assigned directly to me. Other people might just see that domain printer, but I'm seeing both. So again, coming in here and quickly being able to see if this user caught up and needs help, I can quickly see what's assigned to them and make changes of that very easily. Now that's from the Active Directory. I also want to show doing this for what we call network assignments. So let's say a thin client, for instance, which isn't domain joined. I can go into the network assignments, click on new computer, and now I'm just typing a here. So its name, I'll use thin client 001, and it's that same drag and drop operation. So I'm going to find the printer that I want to assign over to this, drag and drop, and just like that now, anyone logging in from this thin client will get this printer. So the situation might be, a common use case would be with healthcare. And so if hospital environment has thin clients that connect into a Citrix VDI session. Now somebody walking up and logging in the thin client 001, no matter who the user is, they're going to get that brother, meaning the brother's probably sitting right there next to the thin client. I know that whoever's using this device should have access to that printer right there next to it. And even if the user is roaming around the hospital, when they're connecting onto this thin client, they get the printer that is right there next to them. So again, that dynamic assignment and the right printer at the right time. Another example would be this IP address range. So I can put a subnet in here. This might be for a given part of the building, or maybe different locations. If I have, let's say I have an environment that has different buildings and each one's on a different VLAN, and then a laptop user that might move around or to different cities. Again, dynamically building based on where they are in the network that they're connected to. So all this layers in together as far as the user account and the groups that they're a member of, but then also their device and where they are in the network. So that covers the basic operation. Again, we're really looking at the ease of the drag and drop in there, and then how that's presented to the user, basically like native printing, where they get their printers from the network and their local printer and their local computer all layered in together. Steve, I'll take a moment here just to see anything that needs addressing from those last few slides.
There's currently not. I do have a question for you though.
Yeah.
So we're talking about giving access to people to allow them to print. Is there anything that we can do to, make sure that they don't map this outside of Tricerat at all and print to a printer?
Interesting, yeah. So we've talked about layering on top of the existing environment. So that print server agent will go on an existing print server and not modify anything on that printer. And in a lot of cases, that's what an admin wants. Like, hey, I don't want to take away that existing access while I'm maybe transitioning over to Tricerat or that type of thing. But because we're managing our whole print process, so those printers, like on the print server, for instance, don't need to be shared. And if you, between print server printers or direct IP printers, if you're not sharing those out in the network, they can still be accessed through Tricerat. And so yes, if you want to take those steps to make sure that they're not just browsing the AD and finding the printers, we can turn all of that off, but still have print capabilities within Tricerat. So admins have that flexibility.
Great, thanks.
All right, so moving on from the basics, one of the things of developing a full featured print solution would be handling all the different cases beyond just the basic ones. And so we do have quite a few. This is just a few that I want to highlight here right now. Actually, we already talked about the user self-service and the maps, but certainly a key piece to just making it very easy for the users. The advanced print features with our virtual driver. So this is another advancement that Tricerat's made that really sets us apart, where we can use that virtual driver, meaning on, let's say, a Citrix VDI image, our virtual driver is already there, installed, ready to use in the base image. And so when a new user logs on and a new instance is spun up, they have everything they need. It's just a database query to get the metadata about the printer. We're not actually installing the different drivers in that point, in that case. But we have this, what we call advanced print feature, the ability to stream the user interface over from the print server. So users still get all of the print capabilities of those printers, be it, duplex or stapling or pin code printing or these type of things, while still taking advantage of the faster logins and the stability and the various things featured with that virtual driver. So a very important aspect to leveraging the better printing through a virtual driver in these remote desktop scenarios, but still keeping all those capabilities. Printer profiles, I actually have a quick demo on that in a little bit, where you can assign not just printers, but you can actually assign default values for those printers. Like a simple one would be black and white or color, or different tray defaults to different groups of users. Mobile printing, we have a print gateway to allow different client types. I think mostly in here I'm showing Windows, but we have a Mac agent, we have Linux, some mobile. And so all of those go through this gateway to layer all of those other platforms into the system as well. Likewise, Cloud Connector, a lot more happening in the cloud. It's rare that we found to be 100% in the cloud. Certainly if that is, we can install our agents in the cloud just the same. But the more interesting cases is where you do have hybrid, and especially for printing, you have a physical printer nearby. And so we have some cloud connectors to connect up so that print servers and others can connect into the cloud and be able to print from cloud desktops down to local resources. And the CSV import also is, I find, an interesting one. The drag and drop, obviously great for one-off cases. As I'm adding a few users in there, very quick, very easy. The drag and drop is a fantastic mechanism for that visibility and simplicity. But let's say you're adding 1,000 of these in. Obviously, then that's a lot of drags. And so with the CSV import, we can take, and again, I'll use a healthcare example where maybe it's 1,000 desktops being added into a new wing of a hospital and the list of printers that go along with that. You can actually do that in a spreadsheet, export it out to CSV, and because we're database driven, it's reading that in, and within seconds, you have all those assignments. You open up the Screwdrivers administration, you see all of those clients, the assignments are already in there, and so it's ready to go. So a doctor walks down the hall, badges in, the assignments are there and ready. So even in those larger, upscale environments, we have the tools necessary to really optimize the process. I have here a couple demos looking at that. And so we've talked some about the print server versus direct IP or printing without a print server. And so we're one of the only solutions that really allows the combination. And so if you have print servers, we take advantage of that. And if not, or if you're transitioning away, we have that option too. And so because we're database driven, we do have a way to open this up, find printer out on the network or drivers that are locally installed, or maybe through INF files, basically any way that you would normally load drivers. But what we're doing here is capturing the information about it and getting it into that central database. It's a Microsoft SQL Server-based database, and it does work with the Express Edition as well. But I scanned that, I did that import, just like that. I have a few drivers in here, and now I can go select driver, and I can see here, normally I'd put this in the 64-bit driver, but if you have older clients that use 32-bit, you can certainly do that as well. And as a side note, we do have a Mac agent that does this using cups, and soon to come will be a Linux version as well. And it's the same process as far as the drag and a drop over into the assignments. Very easy, and it's consistent no matter what the different print scenario is. You'll find that as an admin, it all works the same, and then it appears the same to the user, even if printers are coming from different locations. And just to kind of finish out here, I'm adding in a new printer, this Rico. I imported that from the import tool that we had. I just pointed it to the IP address. I added the driver that I imported in, which is now in the database. That was a one-time thing. And now here I assign this Rico printer out, and it's ready to go. Someone logs in, everything that they have with our agent on their system, be it a virtual desktop, a terminal server, a laptop, a physical desktop, any of these types of environments, we can manage the print queues for that user very quickly through this environment. The other one that I want to show, and I mentioned on that last slide, was the printer profiles. And just I want to quickly walk through and show how that's done fairly easily. So here I'll go in and I'll create a new profile. What it's going to be asking me for here is the driver to base this off of. So in this case, I'm going to choose as an example a Rico printer, and I'm going to do this drop down and pick that Rico driver. And so in this case, when I hit configure, it's loading the dialog for that Rico. And now I can select any of these settings. And I'm sorry if the share is maybe a few seconds behind. But it brings up all of these settings. I can pick them. In this case, I'll pick that black and white option. But any of the tray settings or advanced features in there can be done. And now I've captured that in our discovery tool. So I now have that information that I just clicked on. So I can now come back over here into Screwdrivers administration. And so now I'm going to pair up those settings with a printer. With a printer that's defined here in Screwdrivers Administrator. And so I come in here, a new printer profile, And here I'm selecting, I have, well, this is just my name, Ricoh Black and White. Now I'm taking that, the actual printer, which is that Ricoh Direct, and this is using one without a print server. And then I'm grabbing the driver profile that I did over in that other tool. And again, that's what's pairing them up. So it's set now. That's a setting for that printer. Now it's a drag and drop. Again, let me just assign it to myself. And just like assigning a printer, I drag and drop that over. I do the same thing with the setting. I drag and drop that over. Let me go into the application. I'll fire up a document here. And now if I go into that printer and click on the preferences, it defaults to what I set. And so this can be done. I did this to my specific user, but this could be done to a group. And so obviously you could think of assigning a certain setting out to one group of users and then a different setting to another. And so it's back to that dynamic, intelligent printer assignments out to those users.
Andrew, we do have a question coming in here.
Sure.
If setting up users to not have access to the advanced printer features, do they just see the default Windows printing dialog box?
That's right. So that's a setting in the administration, whether or not to use that. And if you have it turned off, yes, it's basically the default set of features. You can still set color, black and white, tray selection. Let's see, what else is there? That common subset of print capabilities. You just wouldn't see things like entering a PIN code for printing or stapling, the advanced things that you would normally only see within those manufacturer dialogues.
And if you click on the preferences, do they then get access to the advanced features, or is that blocked?
You could do either. So there's actually 3 settings. There's what we call advanced print features direct, meaning it goes straight to the manufacturer dialog. There's what we call indirect, which would be the default, but then there'd be a button so they could access it. Or you could just have it off, meaning they won't get to it at all. Yeah, and certainly over the years, we've tried to really make, within the administration, there's that simplicity of the drag and drop. But as you dig in, if you have more unique use cases, like maybe you want to set this, and that could even be for a subset of users, there's a lot of those advanced configuration options as you dig through those dialog settings. That's a good question. Anything else at the moment?
Not at the moment.
Good. All right, so to talk about some of how Screwdrivers really works in conjunction with Citrix, and this is an important piece of our product, and there are, of course, printing components within Citrix, and so we like to highlight where we go above and beyond that. And so we are a Citrix Ready solution. We've been testing our products and validating them with that Citrix Ready program for many years now. But it is this best-in-class virtual print driver. It goes back to what I was speaking about at the beginning of defining a language for the printing to be optimized for this type of environment. So it actually spools locally on the virtual desktop, or the remote desktop, I should say, sends across to the print server or the local client, wherever the destination is, and spools as a local print job there. And then in between, we can do encryption, compression. We can make sure that it's as fast and as effective as possible. And so between that and then being able to layer the different types of solutions of client printing, print server printing, direct IP without print servers, even into these other desktop types, really drives being able to have that consistency across the full range of platforms that you're managing. Certainly, as we talked about, excuse me, the administrator efficiency and user productivity, and we get this feedback all the time of the amount of time that was taken on printing when it was managed through scripts or policies or other, different ways that admins had come up with it, to really put this in as quick and effective. And it really helps administrators free up time from what is otherwise, a tedious task of print management. And like I mentioned earlier, there's hybrid environments. And so these are just ways that a print and scan solution layered on top of the existing environment can really enhance those workflows for users and administrators to drive that bottom line savings. And I've commented on scanning a few times, but I do want to take a moment to talk about scanning versus printing. There's a lot of similarities where printing is output and scanning is input, of course. And we use similar techniques, but it is a different beast in terms of ways Windows print management is done versus the way Windows does scanning. And so we have developed a virtual scan driver as well. And so from the client, it can interface with the scanner of Twain or WIA, and then it presents itself as a virtual driver on the server. And I've talked about how in printing, we spool locally on both ends and then manage the communication in between. The same happens with scanning with great effect, because instead of USB redirection, we actually get the full scan job locally and then stream it up, and it's much faster, much more stable of an environment for scanning into those remote Citrix sessions. And then eliminating the need to manage these different applications and devices. And so it presents a clear driver for the application on that remote server, so that when they go to do the acquisition of the image, it's seamless and it's the same across the board for applications. And so whether they're doing it locally or in their remote desktop, it all operates as one seamless unit, which is great for the user. A couple diagrams just to highlight how this is set up. And this particular one applies to endpoint printing and scanning. So I have that end user device. It might be my laptop, it might be a desktop or thin client, pretty much any device that's accessing that remote session, such as a Citrix VDI session. And then I have a local printer or scanner available, and then we're using that virtual channel to build it in that remote session. When you add on the capabilities of print servers or direct IP printers, we get that configuration database that we mentioned. That's a SQL database that as users log on to whatever session, it could be a Citrix remote session, my local computer, all of the above, it all goes through, it connects to that configuration database, which is what the administration uses, and then manages the capabilities for user printing across the environment, connecting the print server, connecting to direct IP, whatever it might be. And this gets a little more complicated here when we get into the printing across environments. So it might be two separate data centers. It might be cloud and local, but we do have that remote cloud connector that manages that. So even though there's a few more icons on the screen here, we manage the connection from the two different environments. Let's say the hosted session in the cloud down to the print server that I have locally. That can all be done seamlessly for the user, and it's all built into that same Screwdrivers administrator.
Andrew, got a question coming in regarding scanning. Jay wants to know what the user experience on, say, a Rico copier. Are the scan to network, scan to cloud, and scan to email options available?
Sure. So we virtualize. So there's a client installed on your client device, so a Win32 workstation. And so if it has access to the scanner through either Twain or WIA from the client, that's what we're virtualizing and making available in the remote session. And then in the remote session, that's where you have the application. So the application says acquire. It'll point to our virtual Twain data source, and then from there, we're managing the rest of the process. But the answer to the question is, it's the capabilities that you already have on that remote desktop. Now, like the scan to email is something that's more direct to the scanner, but any scanning, even if it's network scanning, that's done with the Twain or WIA interface will be available in our client and then virtualized on the server.
And if they just walk up to the copier to scan, is Tricerat involved there?
Likely not. It depends on how it's implemented by that multifunction. Most of the time, the application on the remote side is what will trigger the acquire, which will then pass a command down, and then will trigger the acquire from the scanner. So that would be initiated from the computer. Sometimes the scanner, like the multifunction, when you click on that button, it actually triggers the software to wake up and launch the process locally. And if you do then the same from the scanner, excuse me, if you do the same from the remote application, then it'll work. But you know, I'm kind of saying maybe because there are some ways that the manufacturer might implement that to like scan to a network share or something like that. That would be outside of Tricerat. So the answer is a little bit of both. And what I'd encourage, we do have, and I'll show a slide here, we do have some other information on the website, or we'd certainly be happy to actually show the software and you know, get into that kind of conversation directly. Great, appreciate the question. Certainly, any more, please type them into that question box. Any more at the moment, Steve?
Nope, all good.
Good. All right, just a couple other things here as we wrap up. So again, if you have questions, please put them in now. I do want to highlight a couple things coming for Tricerat as we're constantly innovating and adding new capabilities. Actually, speaking of scanning, one of them right now, our scan client is Windows based, but we're actively developing and looking to release a version that would allow scanning for Linux as well. And so that might be a Linux desktop or laptop, but it also could be Linux thin client devices. So we're looking to expand the different range of clients that can adapt into that scanning scenario. Also for Screwdriver's Enterprise, so we do have a Linux client for taking client printers and virtualizing them, same for Mac. But we're adding in the capability to actually manage the local queues for those environments through cups, so that just like on Windows, you can take a Windows laptop and have Screwdriver's Enterprise build a client, or excuse me, build a print queue on that laptop. We'll have that capability in Linux and Mac OS as well. That's coming soon. And then expanding our capabilities with print and hold and other advanced configuration types where a user might print but then pick up at a later point, or for security reasons decide to release at a later point. And so that's all going to be built into our Screwdriver's printers application, so that be it on Windows or a mobile device or these different platforms, you'll be able to release those devices. So that's another thing coming for Screwdriver's Enterprise. I mentioned briefly here a minute ago, but we recently launched Tricerat Academy, and this is on our website. If you just go to tricerat.com, you can either go to /academy, or if you go to the homepage, Tricerat Academy is there at the top. And what this is, we started building a library of generally short videos, but they're purpose built for specific things. You can see a few examples there. But this is a great way to learn about the product if you're thinking about this kind of a print solution. Or certainly as you're implementing or using the product, it's a great way to get help and to understand the different, especially when you get into some of the more advanced scenarios, that's where you can really get some information. So I would encourage everyone to go check that out. It's a great resource to quickly find out more information about the products. And that's the end of our presentation. Hopefully, you know, this walked through some of the examples of optimizing the workflows for printing and scanning, how we really make it more efficient for administrators while giving them a lot of capability in managing these hybrid environments, but also much more capability and optimized workflows for users as well. So Steve, I don't know if there's anything else that came in.
Yes, there are a couple more here.
Great.
So for printing to branch offices without print servers, do those printers need static IPs?
They would need either a static IP, or if you have them accessible through DNS, we can put a host name in there as well. And so as long as you have routing between those two locations, you would either do the IP, or if they're DHCP, then I would put in a host name and probably full, you know, an FQDN, just to make sure that that it's routed to the right place.
Right. Peter wants to know, do you have to enable the USB port redirection for scanning? For example, if your remote users are using thin clients?
Yeah, good question. And no, you don't. And so this is not USB redirection. This is our own communication between our client and the piece running on that remote desktop. Certainly doesn't, if it is enabled, we don't care. But one of the features and one of the benefits is that you can turn that off, especially if you'd like to for security purposes.
Thank you. For scanning, what are the requirements for the scanner and the application?
So what we virtualize on the remote desktop is a Twain data source, and so the application should be able to request a scan from a Twain data source, which is obviously the common scenario. On the client side, it's a combination of Twain, WIA, and we're even working on a few specific protocols from manufacturers to work on a range of devices. But those are the protocols in use for scanning there. And sorry, it was a question for scanning, is that right?
Correct, yep.
Yeah, okay.
What licensing options are available for the product?
Yeah, we have a variety. We generally do this concurrent per user. So a lot of times it matches in with like your Citrix licensing or the different platforms that you have. So if a user is logging into a session and you have our agent installed, then they would need a user license for that. But it is concurrent. So if I'm getting applications from a variety of server farms, maybe even from my own desktop, it's just a single license use. So we look for that to be, simple and flexible for admins.
That's very nice. With more work from home users, how does the deployment work in those scenarios?
Yeah, and so we have the capability to layer on top of a wide range. So a lot of times we're getting work from home, connecting in to remote Citrix environments and VDI and so forth. So a lot of that continues to work exactly the same way. If users do need to print from home, and that's a common scenario that we've seen even well before COVID, there is that client that we can install, and that can be pushed out along with Citrix client or through other internal means. It's a very small, lightweight client, and then the user can print to whatever printer that they have at home, and that's through virtual channels. So if they have existing access, either through a NetScaler or VPN or whatever it might be, it's secure through that channel, and then ability to print from home if you permit that. And obviously, we talked about before, admins have ways to control to say, hey, for this group of users, allow them to get those local printers, but maybe not for the rest. And so there's that flexibility in configuration.
Yes, thank you. You touched on this a little bit. Does Tricerat have support for mobile printing? What are the requirements there?
Yeah, I mentioned that gateway device, and so there's basically a server component that's installed in the data center somewhere that has access to like the domain and the database. But then we have an agent that runs for iOS. I mean, it's in the iOS App Store, and then the same for Android. So we do support those two platforms. And so when a user opens our Screwdrivers app on the mobile device, they put in the information to connect to that gateway. And then the same printers that they have access to on their regular, let's say VDI, or when they're in the office, if I have, printer A and printer B, I'll see that in the app. And so for iOS, I would do a share to get from let's say an email over to a printer, and then it would send through the gateway and print. Or for Android, it presents as a system printer. So those are the two main platforms, obviously, that we support, iOS and Android for the mobile printing.
Perfect. And Michael would like to know, does Tricerat offer any inbuilt DLP features?
I would say no, but I'd probably want to have further discussion on as exactly what they're looking for there. And of course, there's, like I mentioned, we're always looking to enhance and apply the product to new means and to new scenarios. So we'd certainly be interested to discuss further.
Peter has a question here for VDI users. Do you have the ability to detect the thin client from which the user is connecting from and automatically change the user's default printer based upon that?
We do. So I briefly showed in the Screwdrivers administrator, there's the network, and so you can put a client name in there. And so it's common for, if you have a list of thin clients, by just host name for the client. And yes, we would detect that, and that's an option for printer assignments. I didn't show setting default printer, but you can set the default printer based on that. The user even could modify that through the Screwdriver's Printers app if you allow it. But that's actually a very common scenario, so that based on what thin client I'm logging in from, what printers I get, but then also the default printer. And we actually recently had a feature where, let's say a user has, roams some days of the week they're at one office and other days of the week at another. It'll actually remember their default printer based on that location. So in the system, technically they have two default printers, but they just get the one based on the location they are. So it's quite flexible, and default printing is actually a very important piece of delivering that consistency and ease of use to the user.
I agree. Gabriel wants to know, do you support SAP?
We do. We have a component that we call system printing. And so most of our printing is done based on a user login. So a user logs into like VDI and they'll get printers in that session. And let's say like a XenApp terminal server, you might have 100 users, and each user is seeing their own copies of those printers. SAP, if you're using the Windows access, then you have what you need already. You can print, and you're printing to just a Windows printer. But if you're trying to print through like SAP from the server, we have a component that can build those printers at the system level, always available, always access. So sometimes we call this like batch printing or system or backend printing or some of these type of things. So that if the SAP itself pushes through, and we even have ways to share those out as like LPR printers or whatever is necessary to make it compatible. But we do have environments that have integrated SAP printing in, or there's healthcare applications and various other things that need a different type of printing that will offer that system printer for that compatibility.
Great.
These were good in-depth questions. I like it.
Yes, not seeing any more. If anyone has any other questions, definitely reach out to Andrew.
Yes, thank you. And like I mentioned, Tricerat.com is probably the best place. I think my information will be on the information that's sent out, but certainly reach out to us. We love doing one-on-one demos and consultations where we really talk about, because there's so many little different aspects to it, but really getting into what's your environment, what are your needs, and how can we adapt into that. And so we like having those kind of engineering discussions. We would be happy to with anyone listening in.
All right, I'm gonna pop back in then, since it looks like the questions have died down. Thanks for asking all those great questions, everybody, and thanks for all your time today. I know that some of you might have opted in for a chance to win a Sonus One speaker, so I am going to pull the registration report as soon as GoToWebinar shuts down, and we'll have Google number randomizer pick a random winner, and I will get in touch with you right away if you're the winner. And also just keep an eye on Twitter. If you don't hear from me, then you can see who won. Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Steve. Thank you both for being here today. It was great to have you.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you. Great job.
And I hope we'll see all of you on another CUGC event again soon. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. See you guys again soon. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.